This is Bill Cosby. I want to tell you about a college in Ohio. College has a great conservatory, an outstanding science department. It's one of the best liberal arts colleges in the nation. But I want to tell you about it because its story is part of your history and your future. Its name is Oberlin.
Follow the drinking gourd, follow the drinking gourd, for the old man is a-waiting for to carry you to freedom. Follow the drinking gourd.
From its very beginning, over 150 years ago, Oberlin College has been a proud and unconventional place. Proud in its pursuit of excellence and unconventional in its diversity. Oberlin students come from nearly every state in the Union and more than 50 foreign countries. Of its 2,800 students, 1/4 African American, Asian American, Latino, Native American, and internationals. The students differ in their ideas, philosophies, cultural, socioeconomic backgrounds, but they are united by their commitment to the vision of Oberlin's founders, who were educational pioneers with uncommon ideas about educating people regardless of race, religion, or gender. As President Starr often tells incoming students,
at Oberlin, you'll have a chance to learn from and form lifelong friendships with the brightest people your age from around the country and from around the world.
In the years after its founding, the community was a center for the abolitionist movement, a main stop on the Underground Railroad and a jumping-off point for slaves heading for Canada. Resourceful and determined, the slaves made their way on foot and charted the path to freedom by following the drinking gourd, their name for the Big Dipper and the Morning Star. Today, in much the same way, Oberlin College is a launching pad for students from many cultures who chart their course in the mainstream of American life through the pursuit of excellence and social moral commitment. Oberlin's role as an educational pioneer began in 1833 with the founding of the Oberlin Collegiate Institute. The Institute, as it was known until 1850, was an innovative educational complex that included a preparatory school, a college, and a ladies' department. The joint education of the sexes in a collegiate institution was an entirely new and somewhat shocking departure, wrote Oberlin historian Robert S. Fletcher. Conventional society was shocked even more 2 years later when Oberlin opened its doors to blacks. American education would never again be the same. To understand how Oberlin arrived at its landmark decision to admit students regardless of color, you have to know something about the visionary for whom the college was named. John Frederick Oberlin was a country pastor in the remote mountains of Alsace-Lorraine. Oberlin devoted most of his 86 years to revitalizing the area. He was the first to train women as teachers. He founded the world's first kindergarten, and he banished illiteracy from the parish. By the time of his death in 1826, he and his works were known throughout Europe and America. In 1830, Oberlin's achievements came to the attention of Yankee visionary John J. Shipperd, pastor of the First Presbyterian Church in Elyria, Ohio. Frustrated that so few came to his church, and inspired by the example of Pastor Oberlin, Shipperd had a grand dream. He envisioned a Christian stronghold far from corrupt towns and villages, and an army of Christian workers who would go forth and convert the new American West. In late summer of 1832, Shipperd and his friend, Philo P. Stewart, rode a few miles south from Elyria to find a site for their stronghold. Coming to a stump-dotted clearing, they tied their horses to an elm tree and knelt to pray. Give us a sign, they asked the Almighty. No sign was forthcoming. And so they rose to mount their horses, shepherd and steward. They encountered a passing hunter. "You must be blessed," he said. "A she-bear and her cubs come down from that tree only 10 minutes ago." A sign from God, they felt. This was the spot on which they would build. Unfortunately, funds to support their bold experiment was sadly lacking. 2 years later, Oberlin was near bankruptcy. Responding to the institution's plight, wealthy New York abolitionists Lewis and Arthur Tappan agreed to fund Oberlin's future as an influential college if, and the Tappans insisted upon this, if Oberlin inaugurated a policy of student admissions regardless of color. Many heated discussions ensued, as did a student questionnaire long on nays. Finally, the trustees met in Shepard's house to put the proposal to a vote. The first ballot ended in a tie, with the chairman abstaining. Fearing the opposition would prevail, Mother Shepard gathered a number of pious neighbors about her. They knelt in a prayer circle by the door, beseeching God for a favorable vote while the balloting continued. Finally, the door opened and the outcome was announced. 4 no, 5 yes. Chairman Keep had broken the tie. The result was an unmistakable declaration. The education of people of color is a matter of great interest and should be encouraged and sustained in this institution. Shepard's splendid deal had gone through, and the new policy succeeded. Before the onset of the Civil War, more black students came to Oberlin than any other college in the nation, attracted by scholarships, the opportunity to work their way through school, and the chance to meet moral and stimulating people. The first core of Oberlin-educated black men and women formed the first black professional class in the United States and were among the nation's earliest and most influential educators, church leaders, and politicians. A distinguished public servant was John Mercer Langston, the ancestor of poet Langston Hughes. By 1853, Langston had earned 3 degrees from Oberlin. He became one of the earliest black lawyers in the nation and was the first black to win elective office as representative to Congress from Virginia. He also was U.S. Minister to Haiti and the first dean of Howard University Law School. The first black women to attend college anywhere enrolled at Oberlin. They subsequently took on the dual mission of educating their own race and initiating early feminist reforms. Clevelander Lucy Stanton became the first black woman to complete a collegiate course of study, and at her graduation in 1850 gave an acclaimed address titled "A Plea for the Oppressed." Listening to Stanton's speech was a trustee from the college who supported its open admissions policy. He reminded the audience how others had predicted ruin if the college admitted blacks. Stanton's eloquent address, he said, refuted that prophecy. In 1866, the first black woman college faculty member began teaching at Wilberforce University. Her name was Sarah Woodson Early, a member of Oberlin's class of 1856. During the years following the Civil War, Oberlin produced other notable black professionals who sowed the seeds for the planting of both secondary and higher education for blacks. Feminist and human rights advocate Anna Julia Cooper received a PhD from the Sorbonne and served as principal of the prestigious M Street School, later Dunbar High School in Washington, D.C. Cooper was one of a cluster of illustrious blacks from the class of 1884. Her classmate, Moses Fleetwood Walker, was the first black player to break the color line in Major League Baseball. Another outstanding 1884 graduate was activist and lecturer Mary Church Terrell, a charter member of the NAACP. By 1900, Harvard had graduated 11 black students. Oberlin, 100 128. Nearly half of all black graduates in the United States. This led W.E.B. Du Bois to write, Oberlin was the great pioneer in the work of blotting out the color line in colleges. From 1900 to 1965, the percentage of black students at Oberlin ranged from 2 to 4%, a modest figure, but one that resulted in the college producing more black college graduates than any other predominantly white institution in the country. These graduates served as influential role models for young blacks, not only in education and other professions, but in the arts as well. The world of classical music, for example, has been immeasurably enriched by the black composers and performers trained at the Oberlin Conservatory of Music, the nation's first. Will Marion Cook, who went to study at Oberlin in 1884, so deeply influenced Duke Ellington that the Duke called him Daddy. R. Nathaniel Dett, class of 1908, was one of the most celebrated composers of his time. William Grant Still, class of 1921, was the first black composer to have a symphony performed by a major symphony orchestra. Catherine Van Buren, 1935, taught Leontine Price. Receiving its Carnegie Hall premiere in 1991 was a poem for orchestra in 3 movements by George Walker, 1941 Oberlin graduate and Rutgers University distinguished professor. His sister is Oberlin 1945 graduate and pianist Frances Walker Slocum. The first tenured black woman professor at Oberlin, Walker, and the late Natalie Hinderis, class of 1946, an internationally acclaimed concert pianist, had done much to bring the works of black composers to a wider audience and to serve as role models for female black musicians. But Oberlin was never an ivory tower. During Reconstruction and on into the early decades of the century, Jim Crowism was rampant throughout the U.S., and Oberlin was affected. Black athletes on Oberlin's football team, a Midwest powerhouse, faced discrimination when playing other colleges. By the late 1930s, discrimination was so prevalent in college and town that a ban was imposed on Negro dance bands. But when racism surfaced at Oberlin, discussions and reforms usually followed. Black students spoke out and continued to speak out on their own behalf and to appeal to alumni to put pressure on the school to uphold racial equality. Historian and Oberlin Black Studies Chair Adrian Lash Jones says, blacks at Oberlin have contributed to and maintained its rich tradition, often by pricking the social consciousness of the majority. Nor has Oberlin's commitment to minority education been limited to blacks. In the 1880s, Oberlin's ties to the Far East began with Asian missionaries. Other students followed, including Pacific Islanders and students from India. This global community had its roots in the challenging times following World War II, as Oberlin maintained and deepened its commitment to equality. The 1940s saw important changes take place. The NAACP established a chapter on campus in 1948, and in the same year, Oberlin hired its first black faculty member, mathematician Wade Ellis. In the 1950s and 60s, the nation was catapulted into heightened awareness of its black citizens by the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement.
Fires of frustration and discord are burning in every city, north and south. Where legal remedies are not at hand, redress is sought in the streets, in demonstrations, parades, and protests, which create tensions and threaten violence and threaten lives. We face, therefore, a moral crisis as a country and a people.
Oberlin responded. Oberlin President Robert K. Carr appointed the Special Educational Opportunities Committee to step up minority recruitment. Oberlin actively sought black students and reinforced that search with substantial academic and financial support. The result was dramatic. Of the some 2,300 students at Oberlin in 1963, only 37 were black. By 1967, out of a student body numbering nearly 2,500, black students, 134. These students changed Oberlin in significant ways. In 1967, the Oberlin College Alliance for Black Culture, OCABC, now known as ABUSALA, was formed to express student concerns about Oberlin programs and policies. A Black Studies program, now a department, was begun to provide the student body with solid knowledge of the black experience and to maximize possibilities for a racial harmony. In 1969, Oberlin set up African Heritage House to serve as the college's black communal and cultural center. It has become a home away from home, particularly for northern inner city blacks and those from the Deep South who find life in the white upper middle class environment at Oberlin complicated and intense. In 1970, the Oberlin faculty launched a policy of intensive recruitment with the goal of raising the number of minorities in each entering class 10 to 15%. That goal has been reached and exceeded. But enrollment does not ensure smooth progress to graduation. Meeting the college's high intellectual standards requires hard work, hours of studying, and money. Financial worries can divert time and energy and lead to unsatisfactory performance, as can personal problems and feelings of isolation. To address the concerns of its diverse student body, over the last 10 years, Oberlin has demonstrated a strong commitment to their financial needs. In contrast with colleges nationwide since 1980, financial aid awarded to black students here has kept pace with increased costs, and grant aid has increased at a greater rate than loans. At Oberlin, counseling also is offered to students who experience feelings of loneliness, alienation, and tension inside as well as outside their groups. Oberlin has expanded its tutoring and academic advising services and financial aid counseling to students who are considering withdrawing from school. Nor is Oberlin immune to racism. While overt acts of prejudice are rare, many black students perceive more subtle but pervasive forms of discrimination. To combat this, Oberlin has instituted a community-wide prejudice reduction program and has committed itself to raising levels of awareness of stereotypical attitudes. And Oberlin students must complete at least 9 hours of coursework in classes dealing with cultural diversity. Among them, courses emphasizing cultures whose origins lie outside Europe and North America. As a result of Oberlin's numerous initiatives, more black students at Oberlin are persisting to graduation. In 1985, the retention rate for black students was 49%. By 1991, the rate has increased to 75%, far above the national average of 33 to 51%. Today, Oberlin is a leading center for American intellectual and artistic development, a training ground for many of the nation's best lawyers, scientists, authors, and musicians. And by the year 2000, if Oberlin has anything to say about it, more Oberlin scholars will be teaching in our universities, particularly in the sciences. Oberlin has been working since the early 1980s to place students from groups underrepresented on American campuses in the education pipeline from high school to graduate study. Student career groups focus on higher education, science, and business, give peer encouragement, and increase awareness of next step options. Each year, a number of Oberlin undergraduates are designated Mellon Undergraduate Fellows and Ford Mellon Research Scholars. And in June 1991, BP America granted the college $800,000 to recruit and retain 40 students as BP American Scholars in Oberlin's mathematics and science programs. To aid student recruitment and retention, a committee drawing from the college's 2,000 black alumni recently was formed within the Oberlin Alumni Association. This committee has established the Black Alumni Emergency Fund to assist students with special circumstance needs not covered by Oberlin financial aid or college health services. Oberlin trustees also established the John Mercer Langston Challenge Fund to encourage alumni support to the Emergency Fund. A co-organizer of the Black Alumni Committee is David Hord, class of 1981. Hord is Assistant Vice Chancellor for Pennsylvania's system of higher education. He says he owes a great deal to his years at Oberlin, thanks in part to the Underground Railroad. In January 1980, as a winter term project, he and 8 friends recreated an antebellum slave escape from Greensburg, Kentucky to Oberlin, a trip of 420 miles. Donning slave clothing, the 9 friends made their way on foot in sub-freezing temperatures. They ate a survival diet and slept in barns and churches. The trek took 33 days. Successful in their professions, Hord and his fellow graduates are working to create a new Underground Railroad, a national network of future black leaders to serve as mentors, personal advisors, and career counselors to their Oberlin brothers and sisters. Black Studies professor Adrienne Lash Jones says, Oberlin can indeed be proud of her contribution to blacks in America, as well as blacks can be proud of their participation in the college's tradition of excellence and leadership. This tradition carries on into life after Oberlin. Although racial prejudice continues to challenge even the strongest pathfinders, thousands of students have forged ahead to become leaders in education, law, communications, and the arts. Many of today's top-ranked performers received their training at Oberlin. Avery Brooks has spent decades in the theater, playing everything from Shakespeare to Paul Robeson to television's Spencer for Hire and A Man Called Hawk. Outstanding musicians include countertenor Derek Reagan, conductors Michael Morgan and Raymond Harvey, violinist Diane Monroe, concert pianist Kevin Sharp, singer Denise Graves, winner of the Marian Anderson Award, composer Leslie Adams, and consummate accompanist William Allen. In 1983, Eileen Klein became the first woman to head an American Conservatory of Music when she was named Dean of the Peabody Institute of Music. Representative of the school's most visible and prominent alumni in other professions are William L. Robinson, Dean of the District of Columbia School of Law, Spelman College President Janetta Cole, Sylvia Hill Williams, Director of the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art, Nayara Sudakasa, President of Lincoln University, and attorney Jewel Stratford LaFontant, the first woman to serve as U.S. Deputy Solicitor General and a former U.S. Representative to the UN. Emerging young leaders include Dr. David Vinson, surgeon, and Sylvia Hood Washington, a NASA engineer working on the U.S. return to the moon and Mars. Denise Cameron is prosecuting attorney in Ohio. Gary Washington is vice president of Ameritrust Development Bank. And Eleanor Hayes is a television news anchor. A very recent graduate is Ann Gilbert, 1991, an outstanding economics student and the recipient of several postgraduate scholarships. The second player in the history of women's basketball to average more than 30 points per game in more than one season. Gilbert also is 1991 Division III Woman College Athlete of the Year. Undoubtedly influenced by Oberlin's tradition of activism was Vernon Johns, civil rights pioneer and a 1918 graduate of Oberlin School of Theology. In the turbulent 1940s and 50s, John served as pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. During a time of protracted police brutality, he preached a sermon titled, "It's Safe to Murder Negroes in Alabama." Despite efforts of a county grand jury and the Ku Klux Klan to prevent him, he often castigated his black elite congregation for ignoring racial issues, and after considerable turmoil and debate, Johns resigned. The congregation then embarked upon an exhaustive 2-year search. They wanted someone a little less demanding, a little more accommodating than Johns. Their final choice? Martin Luther King, Jr. Certainly, among the most well-known of Oberlin's graduates is nationally syndicated columnist Carl T. Rowan. During World War II, the Navy sent Rowan to Northwestern for summer training as a Naval Reserve officer. When the university refused him residence because of his color, Rowan was transferred to Oberlin. The people he met at Oberlin, the traditions he encountered, led him to conclude, great colleges have a way of projecting their characters and influence from generation to generation. After the war, Rowan returned to Oberlin to complete his degree. It was a memorable period for him. He recalls, "No course I took at Oberlin was as educating as having Bumpy Stevenson, the wife of the college president, join us in a sit-in in a Columbus hotel dining room after we were denied service because I, a black man, was in the group." In 1983, during Oberlin's sesquicentennial, the New York Times said, "In its century and a half, while Harvard worried about the classics and Yale about God, Oberlin worried about the state of America and the world beyond." It still does. In his sesquicentennial tribute to Oberlin, Carl Rowan wrote, "There is something special about an educational institution that class after class inculcates so many of his graduates with a commitment to fight injustice, whatever the economic, political, social, and other risks. That is why, as I travel from city to city, I get such pleasure from meeting people who are fighting for good causes, for a better society, especially when they come up to me and say, 'Carl, I'm Oberlin too.'"
Follow the drinking gourd, follow the drinking gourd, for the old man is a-waiting for to carry you to freedom. Follow the drinking gourd. Now when the sun comes back and the first quail calls, follow the drinking gourd. The old man is a-waiting for to carry you to freedom. Follow the drinking gourd. Follow the drinking gourd. Follow the drinking gourd. For the old man is a-waiting for to carry you to freedom. Follow the drinking gourd. Now the riverbank will make a mighty good road. The dead trees will show you the way. With left foot, big foot, traveling on, follow the drinking gourd. Follow the drinking gourd. Follow the drinking gourd. For the old man is a-waiting for to carry you to freedom. Follow the drinking gourd. Now the river ends between two hills. Follow the drinking gourd. There's another river on the other side. Follow the drinking gourd. Follow the drinking gourd. Follow the drinking gourd. For the old man is a-waiting for to carry you to freedom. Follow the drinking gourd.